Hörrni, strålande. God morgon. Vi börjar 1 minut tidigt. Det gör inget. Jag brukar ju vara kursledare här på BiTA och konsult. Och jag brukar ju säga att ni måste vara inne i tid. Och ni var ju exemplariska att komma i tid. Den här morgonen har vi då kunskapsfrukost om DevOps. Och då har vi Kaimar här som kommer prata på engelska. Kommer han göra. Och det tror jag inte är något problem alls för er här. För ni verkar ha både engelsktalande organisationer och även vara hantera det språket bra. Vi kommer hålla på till klockan 9. Kommer göra. Och därefter kommer jag och Mats Voxlin, en kollega till mig, att finnas här ute om vi vill prata vidare om DevOps. Dessutom så kan man även anmäla sig till en kurs som Kaimar har satt ihop den 28 och 29 januari om DevOps om man vill gå ner på djupet i detta ämne. Och då har vi ett erbjudande i julkampanjen, i samband med julkampanjen, att om man anmäler sig på kursen fram till 21 december så kan en kollega få gå med gratis. Så att man går 2 för 1. Och det kan vara en bra metod för att få samsyn i hur ska vi förbättra eller kanske introducera det här arbetssättet som DevOps kan hjälpa till med. Så det var nog det. So I will leave the rest for this morning for Kaimar. Welcome.
Thank you. And I have no idea what you were saying, so I hope I'm not going to contradict anything that you said before.
In Swedish. Sorry.
No worries. So good morning. You have all your coffee, or you have had your coffee, so that's good. This is a very big crowd. I knew that's going to be a big crowd. I didn't expect this, so I'm guessing it's like between Christmas parties, so rather than going to the office, you come here, it's like nice, and then kind of you have coffee and sandwiches, and you don't need to deal with colleagues who you saw last night at the Christmas party. So the short session today will be about ITIL and DevOps, more about the DevOps side of things, and then how ITIL links to that. I'm going to try to finish in more or less 50 minutes, and then we can take some questions as well. And I think we will be kicked out from this room at one point, so we can just continue with the questions in the hallway. My name is Kaimar. So this is my background. I've been working in the IT industry for more or less 20 years. I started in IT support, and then I moved through software development, project management, and so on. At one point I found service management, and then kind of service management found me. So BiTA, many years back, many years back, it feels very many years back. BiTA hired me in Estonia to run the local office there for consultancy and training. Since then I've done other things as well, and then my last bigger role was with Axelos, so the company who owns ITIL. I was the head of product strategy and development at Axelos, responsible both for the ITSM side of things and PPM side of things. So Prince2, MSP, ITIL, and all these things were in my development. During my time there, we published ITIL Practitioner. How many of you have read the book? ITIL Practitioner book? Okay. By the end of this session, if you don't think that you should read this, then I haven't done a proper job, I think. And we also released a new version of Prince2. So have you read, are you like a project management people at all? No, not really. A little bit, one and a half hand. So the new version of Prince2 is pretty good, I would say. I do like Prince2 anyway, but I think the new version is much easier to read and much easier to apply, right? It's actually much more practical. So if you are interested in project management, then the new version of Prince2 is good. Before I joined Axelos, I was working with Skype, so I was improving their service management practices there, which was interesting because they, being a startup, they already had legacy systems, right? And they had to figure out how to scale, and that was before Microsoft bought them. So I was with them before, during, and after the Microsoft acquisition, which was a very interesting period. I wouldn't probably repeat this part of my life again, but it was really good. And this is me here, competing at the beer sommelier competition in Estonia a few years back. So I like beer, My love of these things is not limited to beer, but maybe beer the most right now. Almost slowly going back to wine. At the moment I work in my own consultancy called Mindbridge. So I mostly do organizational change management consultancy, but also DevOps, a bit of ITSM, a bit of PPM, and then training people in a framework called Canevin, and I will have a slide about that later in the session as well. So that might also be of interest, because it's quite good, not just for managers, but for essentially everyone working in any role, really. So that's me, briefly. I'm going to start this session with the description of IT in the enterprise, because kind of the reason for DevOps to exist partially is the situation we have had in the enterprise for a long time. Right? So this is roughly how IT in the enterprise looks. So this is kind of the decision makers here. So this is the business or non-technology teams. These technology teams, you get different levels of specialism here. You get the business teams here, and then in the middle you have the service desk, right? And then for many people who are on this side, the business side, the only way they interact or can interact with IT is through the service desk, right? And when they do that, it usually means that something has gone wrong, right? Yes. If something is working nicely, then they don't need to talk to these people, right? And you have this huge divide between the business and the IT, right? And in IT, we have been trying to get rid of that division for the past 25 years. We haven't still managed. Wherever I go to larger enterprises, they all talk about, well, yeah, the business. Yeah. It's like as if like you're in IT are not part of that business. It's like what you're talking about, and there's not too many other teams in the organization who would be saying the same thing. It's like you don't go to talk to HR specialists, and then it's like, yeah, we have HR and the business. It's like they don't say those things, or facilities, or any other team, finance and the business. Makes no sense. But in IT, we sometimes still think that it exists. So the way the dynamics work here is the business team here, it might be a department, it might be a product team, they have some requirements, right? And then they want IT to do something, so they send the requirements to IT. IT manager looks at them, it's like, yeah, no, we can't do that. It sends them back. They say, no, well, we don't care, we need them, right? And the ping pong goes on for a bit. And then at one point, when for the last time it goes back here, it's like, we can't do this, is you will do it or you will get fired, right? After which there's a handshake, so we agree. And then it goes to these teams to actually be developed. In IT, for a long time, you have probably heard about this as well, the challenge of silos, right? So the IT teams, they don't really want to talk to each other. So we have the development team and operations and QA and support and all these teams, and they operate in silos, and it doesn't really work out that well. So we have had for the past maybe like 3 to 5 years this massive movement of let's get rid of silos, right? Let's remove the silos in IT. The challenge with this is that it's not just the IT side that has the silos, but it's also the rest of the organization, right? Different departments have absolutely no idea what other departments are doing. In large enterprises, this team here has their own CRM, this team here has their own CRM, this team here has their own CRM, and this somehow they expect that all these tools work to talk to each other, and it's for these teams here to figure out how, right? So the silo thing happens on the IT side and then on the non-IT side at the same time, and that's a problem for the organization. Traditionally, these sides have focused on money, right? So how can we get more for less, right? And how can we deliver more, but get like 10% less budget every year, right? So how to save costs, and there's also essentially how to save costs. Nowadays, this part here is more focused on speed. So the business is focused on speed, but IT very often is stuck in this cost-saving mode, and it doesn't work, right? Because you're optimizing here now for the wrong things, right? And then poor service desk people here. The role of IT in the organization is also changing. So this is kind of the traditional setup again. So you have IT and the business, as I said before. You get the requirements from the business and then send solutions back to them from IT. And then the way organizations then kind of talk to their customers is a little bit similar. So it's a pretty formal way of finding out what the customer needs, but it's very interestingly not really understanding what the customer needs. Because if you have been involved in software development in any way, customers don't know what they want. Right? So the list of requirements is usually quite meaningless in sense of it has lots of things that are not relevant. It doesn't have many of the things that are extremely relevant. And if you do it like this, by the time they get the relevant things from that requirements list, they already have new requirements, right? So this system is quite broken when we think about fast-moving IT and fast-moving business. It has led us to IT becoming kind of the passive order taker, right? So we tell you what to do, you will do this, and you will not argue with us, right? It's like a bad parent. So IT should do what it's told. The new version of IT, or the new role of IT in the organization is, it's actually in the middle of everything, right? But it also means that the central IT team might have less control, because different business departments make their own decisions about technology, what they use and how they use it, right? But the movement here is from the passive order taker to something which is closer to active business enabler. So the IT as something that actually helps the organization to become better and beat their competition, not just be the back office stuff that supports things that are already there. And also the new organizations, Gartner is using this term, and then Amazon is using this as well, customer obsessed. Right, so organizations are becoming customer obsessed. I personally don't like the phrase because for me it sounds like an illness. Right? If you're obsessed with something, it's not a good thing. You should seek help. But it kind of illustrates the way they look at the customer. So customer is not an optional entity to think about. Everything you do is for the customer. Right? You assess your business decisions based on the value for your customers, rather than what you think the value might be for someone there, right? So organization is changing as well. The way IT has been working with the rest of the business, so traditionally again we have had the PMOs in large organizations, so project management office. The business team comes to PMO team, and then they talk to developers, either in-house or outsourced. These guys here might or might not talk to QA, so quality assurance or testing, because this is something that we skip very often, as you know, right? And then eventually it ends up in ops, and then when users start using this, whenever they have issues, they talk to the service desk then talks to the ops team and so on, right? So this was kind of the traditional setup. What has changed now is the business is much closer to development nowadays. So PMO's role is changing in the organization. It's still extremely valuable, but it needs to change the way it operates. But developers are now closer to management as well. So the business teams go straight to product teams. QA is kind of seen as optional very often. Eventually something ends up in operations, but also on the user side here, the service desk is not the only contact point anymore, or the service desk is not the only source for additional guidance. People also talk to their colleagues, or they Google for solutions, right? So many issues that you might have with the system here might not be known to you because they don't really feed back to the information anymore. They just solve stuff and get angry at your bad solutions. So this situation has led to the wall of confusion. So we have dev on one side and then operations on the other side. You have the wall of confusion here, and this is the Friday afternoon, right? So we have just finished a new package, a new version of something. So could you please install this so it's there by Monday, right? So you do that, you start doing that Friday like 4 p.m. You might finish by Monday, maybe yes, maybe not. Sometimes when developers come back to work on Monday, you tell them that, well, actually it didn't work. Like we tried to install this, but it didn't work. And they're like, well, it worked on my machine, so it must be your problem, right? And then you still see the QA here is like, if the arrow would be coming from here, we would probably have less issues, right? But this is kind of moved here. So can you please do the testing for us? Or actually the request doesn't come with it. It's just you need to do testing to actually implement this. And this is all kind of before cloud, but because we have these practices and processes in-house, even with cloud computing, we tend to use the same approach very often, which is not good, And developers are focused on speed, operations are usually fighting fires, right? So every release from here is one more fire. Right? And then they need to keep things stable, but they can't because these guys are just messing things up all the time. Right? So this is the wall of confusion. So these guys here don't talk to these guys here. Sometimes because they just don't like them, right? Sometimes because there's no time. And then in some organizations they have found this magical thing called social lubricant. So you take these guys here, take these guys here out for a beer, right? Or vice versa. But in many organizations that very efficient method has not yet been discovered, right? So you try to solve these issues in a meeting room, but as you all know, when you go to a meeting room with people you don't necessarily like, they're like this. And then it's mostly a blame game, right? So when we had the last outage, whose problem was this? Okay. Or whose fault was this? Your fault or your fault? And then this is also how root cause analysis works. Have you been involved in root cause analysis for incidents? Yes. So in many organizations, root cause analysis stops at the moment where you have found a person to blame. Right? And then you have found the root cause, and if you remove that root cause, or if you change the way they work, then you will never ever have these issues again. Right? This is how technology works. Yes, it's always someone's problem, someone's fault. To get over this situation, one of the things that has been proposed, again by my friends at Gartner, has been bimodal. So bimodal IT, have you heard about that? So bimodal IT is as in two speeds. You can use agile approach to all the new cool things that you do, and then the old processes for the other stuff that you do. This is probably one of the worst ideas ever to come from Gartner. If you have bimodal IT in your organization, it is a symptom, not a solution, right? Because this creates a divide between two ways of thinking, and agile principles is not something that you should use only in one team or only in that team, right? The principles you should use across the board, just the way you use them will be different based on, let's say, how many times you need to release per year. For some tools, it's actually fine to release once a year, and some software requires you to release 1,000 times per day, right? So different requirements based on your customer needs. But this is a very, very bad idea to create these two camps. So this doesn't work. What might work is DevOps, right? So DevOps is a philosophy and the movement. It's not a framework. There is no DevOps book, definitive book out there. There's quite a few DevOps books out there. I think it's going to be Van Haren. I'm not sure. I think it's going to be Van Haren, as a Dutch publisher, who either has recently published or will very soon publish a DevOps book from a guy called Oleg Skrinik, a Russian guy, translated into English. In my experience, probably one of the best DevOps books out there. It's quite pragmatic. It explains things in a very easy language, and it doesn't really go with the hype, but it focuses on things that actually work. Right? So I think it was Van Haren. So DevOps was born as a movement and as a philosophy. So rather than having these separate teams of Dev and Ops, we should have this kind of collaboration model where both sides, development and operations, they both focus on speed. Right? So it's not just stability on this side and speed on this side, but speed for both. And as you can see, nobody likes QA, right? So in the initial discussions, there was nothing about QA. It was just Dev and Ops. And then kind of the testing kind of happens magically by someone somewhere, which usually means here, or not at all. Yes. So this was kind of the proposed idea, and then just to make it very clear, it's not this. Right? DevOps is not DevOps and then a new DevOps team. Right? I've seen many organizations who have done this. It's like we have the developers as they were, we have the operations as they were before, and now we're creating these DevOps teams. How is that collaboration? I don't know. But they probably went to a breakfast briefing and heard about DevOps, and then they decided they will do something like this. Okay, so this doesn't work. There are different descriptions or definitions of what we talk about when we talk about DevOps. One is this, the 3 ways. Right? So 3 ways of when we think about DevOps, when we think about collaboration in IT, we should talk about systems thinking. So not just individual pieces, but how it all fits together. We should think about and talk about amplifying feedback loops. So we get fast feedback from operations to development. Right? It's not just flowing this way, but also the other way. And the 3rd way here is the culture of continual experimentation and learning. So how do we enable the organization to experiment and in a sense fail with experiments, but I'm using quotes here because if you run an experiment and it doesn't deliver what you thought it might deliver, you still have learned from the experiment, right? So the idea of experiments is to learn more about the system, not create experiments that will always succeed. This doesn't work. And I've seen organizations that have tried to do this with, okay, we're happy to fund your experiments as long as you provide me with a very detailed project plan for each experiment and you can guarantee it's going to succeed. Right? That is not an experiment, that's a project. Right? And with projects, the problem is that you do tend to expect that they will succeed. Experiments are very different. And one of the things that you should think about when you think about experiments is you should make them safe to fail. Right? So with experiments, it should be small enough that if it fails or if it doesn't deliver what you thought it might deliver, it doesn't kill anyone. And also doesn't kill your career. That would be a nice thing. Right? So to keep your job. So that's one way of looking at DevOps. The other way that is becoming more popular is this, so the CALMS way. So when we talk about DevOps, we talk about culture, automation, lean, measurement, and sharing, which, as you can see, is quite ambiguous, which also means that almost anything that you want to be DevOps could be called DevOps. And in today's world, I would say that in most conversations about DevOps, the flag to show whether it is or isn't DevOps is, does it work? Like anything in IT that works is now suddenly DevOps, and everything that doesn't work is not DevOps. It's definitely not DevOps. Right? So there is a growing part of the DevOps community who has only seen DevOps and not the old way of doing IT stuff. So they are kind of reinventing the wheel with all the things that we have seen for the past 20 years or so, or more. And they're now calling it DevOps because that's the only way, or that's the only word that they know, or the only world that they know. So yes, in some ways you can say that whatever works in IT today is DevOps. And then when you go to some of the DevOps courses, not the one that we have here, obviously, you will also learn that everything that works is DevOps, and everything was essentially invented by DevOps. Right? So DevOps is a little bit like the 10 Commandments that came from on clay tablets. It's like we were living in dark ages in IT, and then suddenly we had these commandments, and now we know how to work. Right? If only we knew these things 50 years ago. So this is how silly sometimes the movement is, but it has done lots of good things because it has forced organizations to really take advantage of what cloud computing can do for them. Right? It has been extremely useful, but as with everything else, you need to take it with a pinch of salt. Right? And for many people, DevOps has become a religion. Right? And in IT, we like our own made-up religions like this. So is it DevOps or maybe it's ITIL? Right? So let's implement ITIL. ITIL is the solution for absolutely everything. It never is, right? But we become religious about no. But it's like ITIL can do that, and ITIL is the best, or DevOps is the best, or Agile is the best, or Safe is the best. But that's enough about Safe. In some ways, you can also say that the core of DevOps you can describe here. So you have the customer side, and you have the IT side. They both have, if this is the event or situation or problem or the requirement, you have two different views on this, right? You have the customer view and the kind of the IT view. You need to understand that you do have two views, but it's not really enough. So kind of in the world of DevOps, it's not just acknowledging that there are other views, but it's also trying to take that customer view on the situation. So not just acknowledge that they have requirements, but essentially try to walk in their shoes to understand what it is that they really need. So get much closer to your customer, and don't assume what they might need, but actually talk to them. And they know that it might be scary, but you kind of need to do that. What DevOps is not, so DevOps is not about the DevOps team, as I mentioned before. There is no DevOps process, and lots of people who are very fond of processes are talking about DevOps processes. there is no DevOps process. There might be something like a CI/CD process, for instance, or still an incident management process, but there's no DevOps process. Something as a silver bullet, so DevOps that will solve all your issues, or if you implement that tool, then all your problems will go away. We have seen this in the past many times. How many times has it worked? Never, exactly. DevOps qualifications, so I'm still personally strongly against DevOps qualifications, because for me it's weird to qualify people or create exams in philosophy, because DevOps is mostly philosophy. So how do you examine people in philosophy? I know how it's done because my degree is in philosophy, but a 2-day course that ends with an exam in philosophy, it just, for me, doesn't make any sense. I think it also gives a false impression of what these people can do after that. So certification of completion completely makes sense, but now that you're certified DevOps something, it's like, what does it even mean? Right. So personally, I don't like them. Implementing DevOps like we did with implementing ITIL, right? So let's put the 26 processes in, and then after you have done that, you will be successful. The problem with that, of course, always or almost always was that forget about CSI, right? So let's try to get all processes to maturity level 5 and then think about CSI. That is a very, very good recipe for failure. Scientific formulas of success. So you have, I will come back to that. Something like implementing the Spotify model. Like Spotify is one of the organizations who use their own way of working in IT. They described their model. They mentioned that, well, you shouldn't copy our model because it works for us today. Tomorrow it will look different even for us. And what did people do? They started implementing the Spotify model. Right? A little bit like with the waterfall project management side of things. So when in 1970, Royce proposed the waterfall model as theoretically this is an interesting idea, but it doesn't work. The model was on page 1, it doesn't work, it was on page 2. Right? And people usually read page 1. Right? So we have wonderful development. Big Bang DevOps. So we will now create a 5-year plan for DevOps. Right? We shall implement DevOps, we shall create DevOps teams, we shall certify everybody in DevOps, and in 5 years we will be DevOps. You know who else used 5-year plans from history? The Soviet Union. And look at where they are now. So don't do Big Bang DevOps, don't implement DevOps. And also DevOps is not just about technology. Right? DevOps is very much about culture and human interactions. The origins of DevOps, you have Lean, Agile, and ITSM. So it's kind of, you could say that it's a very modern family because DevOps has 3 parents. At conferences and in books, they acknowledge Lean and Agile. They don't like to acknowledge this because they are demonizing ITIL and ITSM because it's a kind of a reaction to ITIL. It's like, ITIL is so bad that we need something new and we have DevOps now. And when you talk to people who say that, it's like, okay, so what is ITIL for you? One of the things they usually mention is the CAB, right? What does the A in CAB stand for?
Advisory.
Advisory. What does it really mean in many organizations? Approval.
Approval.
Yep. So all the changes go through the CAB, right? So you have huge delays in implementing any of the changes, and of course people hate it.
Yes.
ITIL does not recommend that model, nowhere. But because it's CAB is mentioned in ITIL, therefore whatever you do with CAB is obviously ITIL's problem. But there are 3 parents and 3 movements. So we had Toyota Production System, or what we know now by the name of Lean. But Lean came with lots of cargo culting. So we practiced many Lean things, but we usually didn't understand what the mindset was behind Lean. So lots of organizations failed, and we had these weird things like Lean Six Sigma, for instance. We had waterfall project management, which was also used for product management. And usually when you use the wrong methods, you fail. So if you use project management for product management, it doesn't actually work. And we have found out it doesn't work in the past 50 years. And then from ITIL, the focus that we had was IT operations management, and we completely ignored the service view. Right? So now we have cloud computing. From the operations side, we are talking about Agile infrastructure management, infrastructure as code, things like this. On the development side, we talk about Agile software development, right? So Scrum or Kanban or whatever you might use. And one of the new things that is popping up more often nowadays is value stream mapping. So this is one of the really, really good things coming from Lean. And most consultants now, when they come in to implement DevOps or implement Agile, they also do value stream mapping. And this is extremely useful. So a combination of these, we can say this is now DevOps. DevOps comes with principles and practices and tools. Here's a list of some of them. So they did training course. I think you mentioned the training course. Yes?
Yes.
The training course covers most of these in more detail, but just like a taster of what we were talking about. Various practices, tooling, and then principles as well. The course will focus more on the principles and practices and less on tooling, because not that it's not important, but there's so much information about tools out there and not enough about this here. So when DevOps was initially proposed, so one of the people who is behind this, Patrick Debois, this is his description of what DevOps should be. So you have different teams in an organization, and they should all work together, right? So you have HR and management and finance and sales, and they all work together. They optimize for the whole, and DevOps helps with all of this. And then TOC is also used, and it all focuses on the customer needs. So that was the ideal picture of what DevOps should be. What really happened was this. So only these two teams started talking to each other and ignoring everybody else, right? So we got to this situation. We have Dev and Ops, and then as DevOps as a movement and philosophy evolved over time, the community started kind of finding out that there are actually other teams you should talk to as well, like for instance maybe the QA team. So we had a movement of Dev QA Ops for a short time, and it was really for a very short time, right? In the DevOps world, to be fair, lots of testing is automated. And it's a very, very good thing. So the test engineers, they don't do manual tests anymore, but they try to figure out how to automatically test as much as possible, because you remove the human element, the error chance there, and you make it much, much faster. Right? So the concept of QA is changing. Then at one point, and this is still a huge movement, they found out that, well, if we release something without checking it properly, so this doesn't exist yet, and then our system goes down and our customers lose money, then it might be a problem, right? Or if we release something and we use an open source package as part of this, and then we get hacked, and you have seen the news, I think almost every week nowadays someone's data got stolen again. So maybe we should check with this weird security team as well, right, before we release. So there's a movement of DevSecOps. It's a huge movement. We have books, we have training courses, we have exams, and we have conferences. This is the life cycle of stuff in IT. So you have a book, and then you have a conference, and then you have an exam. And then you have this whole industrial complex around this. Happened with Agile, happened with DevOps, happening with this now. And then even after that, some of the people working in DevOps were like, okay, so we're doing these interesting things, but are they even valuable? Like, what should we be doing these things? And then they realized, and this is real revelation, you have never seen this before. There's this one team or one part of the organization you should really talk to, the business, right? So maybe you should talk to the non-technology teams to figure out what are the things that you should be doing, right? And in ITSM, of course, we don't know about that, do we? Right? So if you think about the BizDevSec QA Ops, it's getting quite close to what we know by service management, right? So it's really great that the DevOps community has now finally figured out that service management it might be useful. The service view on things is a little bit different than just the product view. So you have the, let's say, unhappy customer on this side, the happy one here. With a product, it's usually this, if you have a good product, so from the unhappy to happy customer here. But with service view, you have these feedback loops, right? So the interaction with the customer before they purchase, but also after the purchase when they start using the service, right? And you can improve based on these feedback loops. So you have this feedback loop around the whole service provision, and the idea is to kind of remove that part of the customer, so the unhappy customer, and just keep the happy one, right? Because the feedback loop of how they consume the product, how they purchase the product should keep it good enough so you keep them happy. So that's kind of the idea of services. This is the view of service management, or like a simplified view of service management. You have these guys here, again, who have requirements and who could get you fired if you don't follow the requirements. You have them here, you have a handshake at one point. This is where magic happens. This is service management. This is where you design the services. Then they are delivered to the users. Whenever users have issues, they talk to the service desk, operations team A, operations team B, and then developers here. And if this loop works nicely, then these guys here get all the revenue, right? So this is the ideal picture of the world. When we talk about product management, it's usually here. So product management in organizations usually occupies this space. When we talk about agile, it usually occupies this space here. So this is the product manager, product owner here. And when we talk about DevOps, it usually sits here, right? But you know, or you can see that there is more to this than just what we usually talk about DevOps, right? So the DevOps practices and DevOps principles are not in complete alignment. The principles require all of this to work. Practices are usually limited to this. So the course will cover more of this in addition to what's in the middle here. But it's good. I think it's important to understand that there's more to value delivery than just the development and operations working together. You have many other teams who are involved as well. Now when it comes to IT service management and ITIL, so this is the timeline of the ITIL development over the years. Started in 89, right? Version 1, we had 30 books, then we had 20 books, then we had 5 books, again 5 books. Then in 2016, we added ITIL Practitioner, a book you should really read. I'm looking at you. And then early next year, we will have ITIL 4, right? And so far, Axelos has released very little information about what's going to be in ITIL 4. They have talked about the qualification scheme, how it looks. They have also mentioned that it will be built around the guiding principles from ITIL Practitioner. I will cover them today. And it looks like the service lifecycle is going away. Not completely, but the way it has been used in the 2011 edition is not going to be there anymore the same way. But the core of ITIL 4 will be the guiding principles, which are these. And of course in ITIL 4, because it's a new thing, they had to change them, as with everything. So there's going to be a different set, but very, very close to these. So these are the guiding principles from ITIL Practitioner, 9 of them. Not like they are equally important, all of them. So it's not like you have the guiding principle number 1 and it's more important than guiding principle number 9. They're all equally important. The first one is focus on value. And the idea is here that all activities that you do must deliver value for your customers, and then not all improvements deliver value. And I'm using quotes here, because in IT we sometimes have initiatives which we feel are really, really clever, but they actually deliver no value whatsoever. Or they deliver value to the wrong stakeholders, so not to your customers, but to someone else. Maybe the consultants you have brought in. Right? You might have an initiative that is very profitable for the consultants and not really useful for you. You have probably seen those things in an organization, right? So you should think about whether the improvement actually makes sense to increase the customer value. Designing for experience. So this is about getting really, really close to your customer and figuring out what it is that they need. It aligns with principles from both Lean and DevOps as well. Like I mentioned before, the kind of walk a mile in the customer's shoes, right? So try to look at things through your customer's eyes. Do not expect to know how they think and what they need, but actually talk to them. Starting where you are. Very often when you think about improvement initiatives, you have this kind of desire to remove everything that is there today and just start from scratch, right? But that's usually a huge waste. To start where you are is okay, so don't just dream about the future state, but also look at what you have today, the skills, the people, the technology, what you can leverage. Before I move to the next one, for any organization that is using ITIL today and would like to become more DevOps, whatever that means, but let's say that you have this desire to become more DevOps or DevOpsy, or you have the mandate from management that you should start doing DevOps. The easiest way, out of all the difficult ways, the easiest way to do that would be to apply these guiding principles for your service management. Right? And once you have done that, start applying them to other parts of technology as well. This is the easiest and quickest way, and when I say quick, I don't mean a few weeks, right? To really make your service management agile, to make your technology department agile, and to start leveraging the DevOps principles of collaboration and cloud computing on the technology side and so on. So this is one of the ways. This is why I think you should read the book if you haven't. The book is, I think it's less than 200 pages, if I remember correctly. Well, I wrote part of this, but I don't remember anymore how many pages it has. It's a very practical approach to service management, and it comes with a toolkit at the end, so you have templates and stuff. If you have read any of the ITIL books before, it's nothing like any of the other ITIL books. It's written in a completely different way. Right? It's written for humans. The fourth one, working holistically, so understanding that organizations are complex systems. I will come back to complexity. And then remembering that local optimization doesn't equal value. Right? If you improve something here, and here is not the bottleneck, the impact on the value flow will be what? 0. Right? DevOps in many organizations who have started using this initially has become a local optimization. So the loop between development operations has been improved, but the value delivered to customers, 0 difference. Right? So avoid that. Progressing iteratively, so rather than doing big bang changes, try to be more agile with this, so this is kind of linked to an agile principle as well, and keep delivering value continually. So think about your initiatives that you're running right now. So how can you redesign them that the value to your customers will not come in 6 months or 12 months, but will come next week, and then again 2 weeks later, and then again 2 weeks later. Right? So think about that. If you figure that out, you are quite close to making your IT service management agile. Observing directly, this is a lean principle as well. So context understanding is important, and don't just rely on reports, but actually go and see what is happening on the shop floor, so to say. So rather than relying on your, do you know what a watermelon SLA is? Watermelon SLA? So watermelon SLA is an SLA that is green on the outside and red on the inside. So this is an SLA which in the report is all green, but when you ask your customer, they're unhappy. Right? So don't just rely on those, but go and actually talk to your customers. Like, how do you use these systems? How do you use this software? What are your problems? Like, what could we improve for you? You can always ask them in a report, but it's usually better to go and actually talk to people. And using social lubricants might be a suitable method to use here. Just saying. Transparency, which is quite difficult to achieve in many organizations, because if you have a blame culture in the organization, then transparency doesn't really come that easily. But if you create more transparency around your initiatives, you're more likely to get supporters, because when they lack information, people are more likely to work against you, right? Because they're afraid of what's going to happen to them. So if you create transparency in your initiatives, it usually helps. Collaboration across the board in IT and outside of IT. And then this, keeping it simple. So when you think about your processes and procedures, what would be the minimum viable process? Right? So when you're trying to introduce a new process, let's say it's demand management, do you need to develop something that looks like it might be level 5 maturity? Or do you need to put something at least in place that will already help you to move forward? So move away from, let's try to implement the ideal version of all the processes, to what are the small tweaks I could do to improve the situation? Like, what is the minimum viable process or procedure, but also for reporting, because people generate lots of reports that no one reads. Right? So maybe like stop doing that, maybe. And so I mentioned before the 3 ways of DevOps. We have the flow. So we have the flow right now. So this is the current version of ITIL, not the version 4 or V4. We have the flow. We also have the feedback. So if you look at the process descriptions there, and in ITIL 4 they will not be called processes anymore. So you have feedback between processes, right? And then you have also the experimentation and learning around this. Do you know what it's called? The stuff around all of this in ITIL right now? CSI, exactly. So you have all these things here. It aligns really well. So anyone who says that, well, ITIL doesn't work with DevOps, or DevOps doesn't work with ITIL, they don't understand DevOps nor ITIL. Right? So this claim is completely false. But the way ITIL has been used in many organizations is a reflection of what was required at that time in that organization. And some of those practices might not align with practices in the DevOps philosophy, but you can use ITIL in any way you want. Right? So ITIL can be extremely agile or not agile at all. Right? ITIL can align really well with DevOps or not align with DevOps at all. It depends on how you use this in the organization. But if you use things like minimum viable process, you're more likely to get closer to how DevOps sees the world, rather than how the kind of the old IT, or sometimes called legacy IT, sees the world. I did include this slide as well, just like a brief intro to something that I called operations as a platform. So the role of IT operations is also changing, and it's changing towards becoming a platform service for other technology teams. I'm not going to stop too much on this right now, especially as this is going away, right, the life cycle. But the operations role is changing, and the customers for the operation team are not just the non-tech teams anymore, but also the product teams. So the agile teams become customers of IT operations. And that requires a different way of managing your infrastructure and services there. So how to get started with all of this? It's very, very important to really appreciate the context of the organization. So I sometimes use this slide. Some of you who might be able to read this, maybe not, I don't know. So the story here is many, many years ago, centuries and centuries ago, in China there was an emperor called Emperor Hui. And at that time, China was not doing that well. Right now it's doing pretty well, but back then it wasn't doing that well. And the peasants were starving, right? So the peasants came to the emperor and told him that, well, the situation is really, really bad. We're starving. We have no rice to eat. Like, please do something. And the emperor was a little bit like puzzled. It's like, okay, so you have no rice to eat, but why don't you eat meat? So this is how disconnected he was from the reality. Because he thought, well, if I don't have rice on the table, I would just eat meat. And for peasants, meat was something that you ate maybe once a month. Yeah. Right? So he was completely disconnected from reality. A more popular version of this, which didn't happen, but it sounds good, is Marie Antoinette with the phrase, let them have cake. So maybe you have heard about that. So that's the same story. This actually happened. The Antoinette one didn't, but it's a good story. So appreciate the context of when you think about the improvements or what could be done better, is like certain things are done or have been done in an organization for a specific reason. So going in with everything you do is wrong and has been wrong for the past 20 years, and how could you not know all these wonderful DevOps things? It's like, this is not how the world works. Think about this, for instance. Think about software distribution. Right? Do you remember these things? Yes? So one of the things that is kind of part of the DevOps philosophy or movement is release more often. Right? So maybe you release, let's say, 1,000 times per day because you really want to make a very agile product. Now think about your product back when we shipped it on these floppy disks, and it would be changed 1,000 times per day. So 1,000 times per day, you copy the new code to floppy disks, probably like 10 floppy disks at a time. Then you ship it to all your customers, right? And then you repeat that for 1,000 times per day. Doesn't really make sense, does it? Right? So going back and looking at what you did here in this time and comparing this with what you can do today is not fair, right? So you did certain things, you had slowness here because the whole system was slow. Now you have capabilities here to make things faster, and you should look at what these are, but going back at, well, you were stupid back here. It's like, no. But there are consultants who kind of claim that, so that makes me a little bit angry. When we talk about Agile, Agile is not about failing fast, but about learning fast. And very often it's sold as, well, fail fast. No, you need to learn fast. Sometimes you need to fail for that, sometimes you will succeed. The point of Agile is not to fail. Right? It would be quite stupid if the point of Agile would be to fail. And then when you look at guidance that is available, there's one thing that is very often confused, and this is correlation and causation. Right? So when you observe things together, is there some correlation or is there actually causation between two things? And this is one of the examples of a confusion between correlation and causation. So the number of people per year in the US who drowned by falling into a pool correlates highly with the number of films Nicolas Cage appeared in that year. So correlation is, you can see the correlation here. Causation would be you had more people drowning because Nicolas Cage had more movies. Lots of management literature does this. So we have more drownings because of Nicolas Cage. So be aware of this when you read articles in HBR and elsewhere, or when you read management books. Very often the confusion is very, very real. So organization A and organization B are successful organizations. They also did these things, therefore they're successful because of these things. So when you too do these things, you will be successful. The problem with that is organizations C and D, who are now bankrupt, did exactly the same things as well. Right? So there's more than just a few practices that will determine how successful you are. I'm not going to mention this one. I will mention this one. So this is one of the principles from Lean. So you should have your long-term vision, but it's very, very important when you make management decisions that you base them on the long-term philosophy, not on short-term one. Right? Because if you optimize for short-term, you keep doing that, and what you're creating with that is you're creating more and more technical debt. And you have no time to actually address that. So the company is, you're moving forward, but the forward movement is like this, not like this. Right? I promised to mention this one as well. So this is the Canadian framework. Canadian framework is a tool that can be used for sense making. The idea here is that the world can be divided, maybe divided is the wrong word, but some things are ordered and some things are unordered. And we have many conflicts in organizations because we are trying to use the wrong tools in a wrong context. So the name is Canadian, it's a Welsh word meaning habitat. So sometimes best practice and procedures are fine, sometimes you need expert knowledge, and sometimes you have situations where experts don't know. Right? However many experts you gather, they won't know because it's unknowable. So the only way you can solve issues here is you run experiments. Right? But if you try to use experts here, you will keep failing. Also in here, you can have different viewpoints on the problem that are equally valid. Here, you probably have an expert view, and experts potentially might agree. Here you can have coherent views which are conflicting but still make sense. What will you do? Right? So it needs a different approach, and when you're in chaos you also need a different approach to, let's say, here. And for instance, if you get very, very lazy and complacent here, the risk is that you fall over the cliff to here. Right? If you think that everything that comes in always looks the same, I should do this, I should do this, I should do this, and then suddenly you get something completely new, you're not ready for that, and then you go into chaos. Right? So there's more stuff, of course, available for this, but this is a brief introduction. It's a very, very good sense-making tool that you can use. Another thing I mentioned before is value stream mapping. This is an image of what the value stream map would look like. This is a very, very short and simplified version, but if you see something like this somewhere, right? So that's kind of the design of this usually, you will recognize this as a value stream map. So this is definitely something to check out. We'll cover this in the course as well. And then kind of to finish it up or wrap it up, this is from Deming. So people are already doing their best. The problems are with the system, right? And only management can change the system. So don't blame people, don't blame teams. If you have the power to change the system, look at the whole system, because people are trying to do their best within the constraints of the system. If you want people to change their behavior, change the constraints of the system. Don't try to push people directly to behave in a certain way. And that kind of goes back to complexity thinking and Kevin as well. Like it's not about pushing, it's about nudging, and it's about creating the constraints that would move the system towards where you want it to move. But you also need to be aware that very often you don't know where you want to end up. So don't create a 5-year system improvement plans. If you want to read more before you come to the course, because you will all come to the course obviously, there's an Using Kanban in IT Operations book from Axelos that I co-wrote with Dominica de Grandis. And there's ITIL and DevOps Getting Started, also published by Axelos. These are free white papers that you can download from the Axelos website. And here's a bunch of books that you might also find interesting and relevant for this topic. This is Dominica's new book on Kanban, Making Work Visible, very, very good. This is the practitioner book. The Principles of Product Development Flow, extremely good book, but very, very heavy in terms of content, so not an easy one to read. The Toyota Kata by Mike Rother is probably one of the best lean books out there, so I definitely would recommend this one. And this is the Donella Meadows book about thinking in systems. So systems thinking, if you want a reasonably easy to read introduction to systems thinking, then this one here will be your best choice. If you want to learn more, if you want to ask questions, if you want to provide feedback, then I'm quite active on Twitter. You feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn as well. And then I sometimes write longer stories, like 5 to 10 minute reads on Medium about service management, agile, DevOps, but also project and program management. So if you want to read more about how I think, then you can visit that page there. And that was me. Thank you. And I will be outside there if you want to ask questions too, because we need to free the room, right?
Yes,
so I will be
correct.
there. Just feel free to approach me and ask questions. I will be here for what, 20 minutes or so.
Yes. Så ni får komma ut här utanför rummet så kan vi fortsätta dialogen. Och som vi sa så kommer ni få materialet, kommer ni få mejlat till er. Och i den också en utvärdering som ni gärna får fylla i. För att vi vill gärna förbättra våran möjlighet till frukostmöten. Tack så mycket.